Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another Doctor Who review. And today is not just any old Doctor Who review. Of course, we've been doing a lot of Big Finish recently, and that got me thinking, what about the lives of Captain Jack Harkness? So, without further ado, let's give you a little more in-depth idea into what Jack's been up to when he's not with the Doctor. So the first story in this box set is called The Year After I Died. It picks up from the point in time after Rose brings Jack back from the dead. And of course, Jack has returned to a destroyed Earth after surviving the Dalek incursion. It turns out the Daleks have absolutely slaughtered humanity and left the planet a waste and cinder. Jack goes down to the planet below in hopes of finding some survivors and helping them out, but what he finds instead is way worse than the devastation. He finds a world so depressed, so deprived, that they won't even help themselves. The second story in this box set is called Wednesday for Beginners. Jack turns up as the cheeky new neighbour in the block at Jackie Tyler's block and introduces himself. Upon doing so, suddenly he ends up taking Jackie into an adventure she didn't intend to have. The pair go on to have a party in a void of nothingness as they begin to question why everyone in the block has mysteriously disappeared and nothing seems to have been said about it. Jack and Jackie have been taken out of time completely, and the only way for them to return back to normality is for them to save themselves. The third story in this box set is called One Enchanting Evening. Jack stumbles upon a mysterious date with the alleged Alonso from the late, great Titanic. The Titanic from space, of course, just so people know. Upon getting it on with Alonso, the pair find themselves in a crashing ship that seems to be tearing itself apart. Jack and Alonso must find a solution, but there's a problem. There's only one life pod, and there's not enough room for both of them. Alonso almost sacrifices himself for Jack, and Jack won't have it. But Jack is powerless Jack is powerless to save Alonso, and so he thinks that Alonso is dead, only to discover later on in the story that Alonso has saved himself. The final installment of this first box set of the lives of Captain Jack, Jack finds himself in a story called Month 25. Month 25 kinda goes in depth into the story that most of us are really intrigued about on TV. Jack points out on TV that a lot of his lives have been stolen from him, but he doesn't know why and by who. But in this story, he does kind of find out a rough answer to who. Upon messing around in the time agency and with time events and so on when he's out on missions, the time agency have taken it upon themselves to finally punish the alleged Captain Jack Harkness. But in this story, Jack is not known as Harkness, he is known as another name completely. Regardless, when Jack returns from a mission and drunk and waking up from an emergency kind of situation, he finds that half of his life has been wiped completely clean, and that he is now intending on finding the people who did it to him and hunting them down once and for all. But after looking for clues to the time agency and where they've gone, he runs up empty and gets nowhere. In Volume 2, Jack goes looking for the Doctor in an episode called Peace of Mind. But instead, rather than coming across his incarnation of the Doctor, he comes across the Sixth Doctor, played by Colin Baker. It turns out that Colin's Doctor is in dire need of help, as he seems to be regenerating, but he doesn't know why. All he knows is that he has been hurt. Jack consumes a large amount of this regeneration energy and decides to take on the persona of the Doctor in order to help the Doctor out. He flies the TARDIS to the last known location the Doctor was at before he was hurt, and discovers that a whole shrine has been dedicated to the lives and deaths of people who lived on a planet. But, to make matters worse, the planet is at war with itself, as two factions argue over the sentience and the Memoriad, as they call it, a high intelligent database that basically holds everyone inside. But Jack comes up with a solution. Jack decides to marry the artificial intelligence that wants to take over the planet in order to create a ceasefire. But the Doctor disagrees with this decision as Jack comes back and debates over the situation. They have a lot of banter, and Jack points out that maybe the reason the Doctor has never managed to save the universe is because he hasn't married Davros. Davros and the Doctor sitting in the tree, Kissing. But back to the matter at hand. Jack begins to give the artificial intelligence the access to the dead bodies, but in doing so, he creates a far worse monster who is ready to destroy everything and everyone out there in the galaxy with the help of a traitor to the society. Sadly, in the process of trying to save the world, Jack almost loses a friend as her oxygen tank begins to run low and low. Jack and the artificial intelligence come to a divorce, and luckily, she agrees to cease fire as she gets retained back to her original form. They become very amicable and go their separate ways. The Doctor and Jack both learn a valuable lesson about playing each other's parts in the scenario, and also grow to respect each other, even if they don't know exactly who each other are at that point in time. The second story in this box set is called What Have I Done? Jack goes back in time to World War I, in which he comes across a soldier who seems to be dealing with amnesia and a kind of shell shock. Jack believes it to be the result of him witnessing a creature that's lurking through the mud and has something to do with time distortion. Jack manages to save the soldier's life, but risking his own in turn. Upon coming to the Allied trench or the enemy trench, depending on which way you look at it, Jack gets shot through the heart, only to wake up later, but the soldier doesn't know this and assumes Jack is dead. The final story in this box set is Driving Miss Wells. Trinity Wells, a news reporter who doesn't believe in aliens, finally gets to see the world for what it is. She thought that everything she had written, everything she had done, all the cover-ups was a mistake. But as Jack enters her life, soon she realizes the aliens that she wrote about, the things that she talked about on TV, the things that they decided to cover up years later, the Saxon incident, the Slovene at Downing Street, the Rachnos beneath the Thames. They were all real. They all really existed. The final volume of this series, The Lives of Captain Jack, features Camilla Condry and Alex Kingston. The first story in this box set is called Crush. Captain Jack takes Jackie Tyler out on a date, but end up on a rail replacement bus that seems to be killing its passengers, only to discover that the killer is the driver himself. He is an android who believes that his loneliness has given him the justification to kill his passengers. Jack and Jackie manage to thwart this plan and help once and for all. But at a cost. They find that they couldn't help the people who died on the bus due to all the passengers overlooking them. The second story in this box set is called Mighty and Despair. Jack decides to set himself into isolation. He hides himself away on a barren planet after being told he is part of a prophecy to save a whole race. Little does he know that this race is being slaughtered by vampires. Suddenly a ship crashes on his bewildered isolation planet, and he finds himself at the mercy of a vampire. She starts to look into his mind, even though she's quite weak herself. Jack manages to block her out. He doesn't quite like her, but comes to grow and see her fondly. He eventually helps her get off the rock after her servant decides to commit suicide. Then, when they get back to the planet that Jack was supposed to help on and save the people from, he finds that the woman has killed her own brother, killing off her bloodline of vampires, and finally destroying her lineage once and for all. Confused to why she would do this, Jack begins to feel his heart break. He asks her why. She tells him that he will understand soon enough, that the bloodline should always have ended, and this is where it was going. The final story in this installment of series is R and J, River and Jack Harkness, or should I say, Song and Harkness. Either way, this story is about River and Jack meeting in all sorts of different orders. Jack meets her as a child, meets her as a murderer, and most importantly, he meets her before her final moments. Jack finally finds the woman he loves the most in the universe, but realizes soon enough he can't have her. He goes from time to time period, trying to find out why she won't go out with him, only to discover in the end that she is of course married to the Doctor. She does marry Jack, however, at a certain point in time. They both begin to do things that they never thought possible, as River points out that she sees Jack as very normal. It turns out that River at some point in Jack's timeline must have figured out that Jack grows old and becomes the face of Bo, because the very final moment in where Jack tries to catch up with River one last time, she seems to have found herself at the funeral of the great face of Bo. She offers her condolences, but Jack turns up and is completely confused to who the lately departed is. He pays no attention to his own funeral and decides to go gallivanting back and forth through time, looking for a way to meet up with Professor Riversong. River and him come across a time distortion that wants to eat both of them whole. But of course, this isn't going to work very well for them, and so they need to find another feast for the distortion to feed on, at least giving them more time. Jack and River manage to take one of River's ex-husbands as victim. After gallivanting around the universe, her husband turns up to ruin Jack and River's wedding, and of course, he is the perfect feast for them to let the time distortion take over. River also pops back and forth in Jack's timeline. She turns up during his Doctor adventures, whether it's the far future, Cardiff, or even the time when he was imprisoned on the Valiant by the Master. As the story progresses, they both look for certain truths in each other's lives, only to discover that it's not all black and white. So what did I think of the lives of Captain Jack from Volume 1 to Volume 2 to Volume 3? Well, I absolutely love it. I love the idea that we finally get a solid answer on where the story's been going with Jack and what he's been up to since we've last seen him on TV. I like the mind wipe in Series 1. I love the 6th Doctor story in Series 2. And to top it all off, in this 3rd volume, I love the idea of Jack and River finally meeting two complicated time events swirling around each other, and for that reason, I give The Lives of Captain Jack a solid 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in another Doctor Who / Doctor Who Universe review. Until then, goodbye, you beautiful people. And LLZ.